Okay. If there are any questions, you're welcome to ask. All right. So there's a second mic right there, and you can either pin it or hold it. It's up to you.
Hey.
Hi.
So a few nights ago, I had one of those meditations that was restless.
Mm-hmm.
And the way it showed up for me was my legs were very restless.
Mm-hmm.
Like they wanted to like contract, and it was like, get me out of here kind of thing. Right. Well, actually, I got that a little bit backwards. So my legs were restless, and it was the last round of the evening, and I said, I'm really tired. And so I skipped that round.
Mm-hmm.
And I went upstairs. I took care of my restless legs and took a shower and went to bed. But I felt guilty that I didn't face the discomfort. And then another night is when I had restless legs, and I sat there and waiting. When is that bell going to ring? So, what's your suggestion as to how to deal with that? So one way to do it is like I could just say, okay, I can man up and I can bear it, and I can just sit here and get all the discomfort, and then eventually the bell's going to ring. But I think there's a better way, and I want you to tell me what it is.
You sure you would like to have a better option, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, for one thing, that's, I think I might have used that before, so you'll hear me saying that. There's this saying that was kind of passed on in Poland during like communism time. And the saying was going like this: if you think it, don't say it. If you say it, don't write it down. If you write it down, don't sign your name. If you sign your name, don't be surprised. Which, who knows? In this country, it might be also a little bit accurate, but whatever. But it's almost like that there are those layers, right? Like, sure, staying with discomfort is the way in which we don't add another layer of resistance, right? But then sometimes, of course, like, I mean, I don't think it was maybe necessarily the case with you, but let's say there are like pain states, or like, or even on the emotional spectrum, right? Like if someone's kind of getting into panic attack territory, we don't necessarily tell them just stay with the fear and just let it take over you, right? Because there are some neural pathways that are being built that maybe like going to full-blown panic attack is not like necessarily advisable, right? So in the same way, with the physical discomfort, I have myself, I have sat through a lot of discomfort and paid some price for it, so as long as it's not like that extreme, which means we really are starting to damage to ourselves. Generally, if it's just within the realm of restlessness, of like, this kind of squirmy feeling of like, just kind of want to crawl out of my skin and just need to move. Generally, the bad news is, or the good news is, that, just sitting with that energy is what gradually can put it to rest in a certain way, right? Because it always wants to have reaction, always wants to jump out of that, right? It is only through kind of letting yourself stay with it is that energy of wanting to get out is kind of put to rest. But if you feel like, you already went up, you already took a shower, then, another layer is like then feeling guilty about that, right? And then, I know, but it's like, since you brought forth the question, I'll just play with it. Okay. I know it's not a biggie. You feel guilty, and then maybe you feel judging yourself for feeling guilty for having jump out of the restlessness, right? So that's what I meant by don't, when you think it, don't say it. When you say it, don't write it down. It's kind of like that in a certain way. Whatever is arising, whether it's restlessness, okay, let's explore that. Let's be with that. And if there's the next layer, oh, I feel a little bit kind of guilty, or like maybe I shouldn't have done it. Then look at that. Oh, okay. Is there something that's referencing other moments, right? Is something that's going back to something and kind of creating a story about this moment based on something from memory, right? So whatever is happening at each of those levels, right? Or if let's say both happened already, and then maybe not in your case, but in someone else's case, someone would start like, oh man, like I shouldn't have had this guilt, and right? It's just like each layer is just like another castle on the sand of just thought creating more and more layers of unnecessary turmoil. So just staying whatever there is. And again, restlessness is a tricky one, and I think there is some way in which we can exacerbate it by sort of getting into push and pull with it in our minds, and that's a primary lesson of restlessness. And in fact, restlessness is almost at the bottom of the whole identity structure, right? Like if we, like even looking at this feather model, right? Fourth and fifth are the reactivity, and then sixth and seventh is the kind of subject object, right? And then eighth is the self, and then ninth is actually restlessness, right? So it's almost prior to is this kind of very, it's that feeling of let's say, even amoeba or like a little crab that kind of is either in a too hot place or too cold place, right? And just kind of wants to change that, right? So it's that sort of movement of like I need to get out of here, and sometimes it is of biologically of that, like I have to avoid being obliterated. I have to seek pleasure, avoid pain, right? So it's very early energy in some way, and staying with it on each level of when it arises is valuable to some degree. Kind of learning how to be with discomfort is a, as it's one of the kind of biggest lesson of this whole process in a certain way, because
So like during meditation, I'll be sitting there and I go, oh, when's my leg going to contract? And like it'll actually move a little bit or go like that. Mm-hmm. So I'll be watching, waiting for when that's going to happen. But I mean, part of me wants to like not mind it at all, but turns out I do mind it.
Yeah. And is there some physical, I don't know,
an underlying physical problem?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
It's strictly restlessness.
Yeah. So just if you see, or at this moment that movement is not there, but there is like anticipation of there, is the instruction is the same. Go right into it, right? Just same as you go to the right to the restlessness, just go right to the anticipation and see like, oh, what is that, right? So whatever is arising, whether anticipation, restlessness, guilt, judgment, like any of that, just go right into it and in a certain way, like give it permission to be,
right?
Because that no is just that's what starts the chain of events.
So there's no reason to bullshit myself that it isn't uncomfortable. So I could just, I mean, what about just say, oh, this is uncomfortable. Okay, I'm going to sit in the discomfort.
Yeah,
that's good.
Sure, that's pretty truthful description of the situation.
Okay, so another part of this was managing the situation. So I have certain strategies. I mean, this is the kind of thing that sometimes shows up on retreat. Mm-hmm. So one strategy is walk around between rounds. Another strategy is, stretch. Another strategy is, pull out my little massage gun and go over my legs. So it ain't no problem with all these strategies, or is that like trying to head off the thing that's coming that I don't want to have come?
Do they help?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So so it sounds like there is some slight physical component to it, right? If if it'll be purely just that energy of restlessness, just doing stretching or just doing walking, might or might not help, right? But if it's predictably it helps, right? I don't think there's any problem with that. For example, because we are doing something that is kind of somewhat unusual to those bodies, right? Like, we evolved basically running the entire day around savannah trying to get the gazelle, right? Like, so of course there is some some unnaturalness in just like trying to sit still on a chair for all day. So in a Zen monasteries too, like it's actually mandatory part of the program. Between each meditation period, there's a walking meditation. Just because it kind of helps move things, move energy, and so yeah, I would say that sounds good to me.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sorry, I wasn't much helpful, but
it was very helpful. Thank you.
All right. Oh, sorry. Yes, I'll get back there.
So the question I wanted to ask Angela, but he didn't let me.
You think I'll let you?
I don't know. So first time asking the question, Angela said, call of the search. From the way I understood it, one of the things is my only practice is open awareness. And the way I understand it, open awareness, no effort. Shikantasa, you notice effort, you drop it. On the other hand, getting into the gap, the way I understand it, requires effort. And let me kind of tell you how it happens to me. Like it especially happens during walking meditation, because walking triggers thinking for me. So thought comes up, sometimes I get lost into the daydream. With enough mindfulness, I catch it right away, and I realize that there is another thought that says, this thought has to be thought through. When I notice the thought, I just drop it. And then the same thought comes back. It really wants to be thought. I drop it again. It comes back. I drop it again. And I kind of feel that that's what leading me to the gap, but that's really anxiety inducing. Mm-hmm. Because it's like I told someone, it's like you're really hungry and like there is like juicy steak. I'm sorry to the vegetarians, and like you take the bite and you spit it out, and you take the bite and you spit it out. That's how it feels.
So what was the question?
The question is it fine to kind of push myself here to the level of discomfort?
There's definitely not, the purpose of it is not to push yourself into discomfort in that way of speaking, mm-hmm. right? Like we were just speaking, when discomfort is arising, being present to it is one thing, but kind of trying something kind of so hard that you're kind of getting all discomfortable, I wouldn't necessarily think that's in a certain way you can say that natural meditation, Shikantasa, is sitting in the gap, right? And it's not necessarily in this like artificially created gap between thoughts. It's about the gap between this constant stream of trying, right? Mm-hmm. So with just the way you describe the way of I mean, my intuition is, which is maybe actually unrelated to both those things that we were discussing. If you are working in staying in the gap, and this, the way you described it, this whole thing starts to unfold. What I would do is to examine, not like, because there's another thought saying I have to examine this thought and this, and and all of this happens, right? what I would do in your place would be to actually, in those moments, zoom in and really merge within what the thought substance is. So not because gap in, let's say, even if there's a gap between thoughts, right, there's still nature of consciousness, right? And the nature of consciousness is exactly the same in its totality as in its particular expression. But of course, we have a tendency to identify it with the particular thought, right?
Mm-hmm.
So whenever you find yourself, let's say you want to kind of stay in whatever this gap is, and the thoughts are coming up, rather than like trying to find like a gap or like trying to stop them for a minute just to have that gap, I would say when the thought arises, just bring it close and see it. It's exactly like flying in an airplane through the cloud. Like in the distance, there's this thing that has a shape, but when you go right into it, suddenly it's just moisture. It's just, there's nothing to it. There's nothing solid, right?
Kind of let the thought go, let the thought go on, but be present with the thought. Like what Angela calls get closer to the thought, I think.
Yes, but it's not just kind of be present with a thought, because that implies two things. That implies still like a subject-object relationship. Those are like, maybe I'm picking on semantics, but just to make it clear,
Mm-hmm.
right? So it's not like, oh, there's a thought arising and there's like this thinker, almost like a subject that kind of is able to observe it. It's more like when the thought arises, it's almost like bring it exactly at zero distance and then see what the substance of thought, what the thought is made of which substance is it made of, right? And it takes a little bit of intuitive trying or like getting a hang of it, because at first it's not very obvious what does that mean, right?
Right, I'm trying to kind of fine tune into that,
Yeah.
and I'm not sure I quite get it.
Yeah. So let's say there's a thought, any thought, right? So you can have a auditory thought right now in your mind that says repeatedly thought, 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 right?
Yeah.
And then it's almost like you look at that. Thought is almost like a form a little bit, right? Like some people almost, when they slow it down, they almost like there's almost like a visual component to it, but mostly it's auditory. So this thought form, right? Like let's say the thought that says thought, when it arises, you kind of like zoom in, right? Like you bring it close. You get closer to almost like the texture. What is this form made of, right? And then you can see that there is actually the same knowingness, unlocalized, open knowingness, that the kind of totality of consciousness is, right? Which sometimes is referred to as unbound consciousness. For some people, like the zooming in works more, like almost like, but for some people, like bringing close, which means just closing the gap, merging, just not leaving any room for there being a thought, and then kind of someone apart who could kind of see it, because that's still, there's like a little distance there. So it's kind of closing the gap and then seeing that very thought is made of the unlocalized knowingness that the gap that Angelo was guiding to you is.
Mm-hmm.
So in a way, you can see that the particular thought is non-different than the gap.
Is it the same for visual thoughts? Because I seem to have kind of
Sure. Just then the analogy of the screen is very apt, right? Like it's you come as close to the projected movie on this screen. You come as close as possible, and then the kind of content of the image stops making sense. It's just literally light, right? It's just the sort of kind of fabric of it almost, right? It's made just of this knowingness, so just kind of conscious, unlocalized, nothing in particular yet present. And there's no striving in it. It's just like curiosity of closing the distance, merging into, and then seeing like, oh, when I enter the cloud, right, The cloud itself is empty, which means, when I enter the thought itself is of the nature of the gap, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So just, explore that.
Okay. And one last question. Everything that was said doesn't mean that there is a problem with kind of pushing harder in terms of number of sits, sitting more. That's all unrelated to this, right? That's all.
I mean, just the fact that you use the words pushing hard.
Well, no, not pushing hard, but there is always like I can go for a walk or I can squeeze in another 2 seats between in the break. So it's like I feel like
I would experiment with both.
mm-hmm.
Going for a walk and seeing like, oh, is that exploration absent when I'm walking? Because you say also you have slightly more difficulty with walking, right? Like it's
Mm-hmm.
kind of a little bit thought conducing somehow. So maybe it's actually very potent ground to kind of, because in the end, we kind of shine light into all aspects, like, all aspects of life. We don't compartmentalize it like, oh, this is the formal practice. In the end, we kind of have to, it's like this sort of attitude of finding that clarity in every single, place and time. So I would say, just explore how that unfolds in all those circumstances. And if you find yourself going kind of more and more into like just continuously being drawn to sitting, that's it's totally fine, as long as you kind of are
Mm-hmm.
clear that there is like an ease within it, rather than kind of striving in this particular case. I mean, there's a place for striving too, in my opinion, but
Yeah, pushing hard was a little bit hard on myself, but I feel like I need a little bit of goading sometimes because it's easy to get distracted and like
sure, yeah, you can.
helpful to remember what I came here to do. Yeah.
No, I agree. I mean, there's a middle way, right? Like, of course, on one hand, I mean, we all made some time to come here, right? Rather than, so sometimes there's this way of pointing of like, oh, it's, your everyday life is it, and there's no point in like doing some strenuous formal practice. But at the same time, it's like, if that would be 100% true without another side to it, then we wouldn't need to come here for a month. Everybody would stay wherever they were, right? So there's like a middle ground between seeing with the kind of like any sort of like impatient energy or like a discomfort or those qualities arise, then just seeing, just reflecting on like, okay, why is that? If I'm just trying, or just not trying, I'm just here to with curiosity explore the effortlessness, right? But also if just naturally you're drawn to kind of sit more, that's great. That's fine. I don't see a problem. I've been there, done that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks.
I'm a big fan of Shikantasa these days, and I would just like to hear your, like, how would you instruct Shikantasa? Like, what does that mean to you? How would you instruct that?
Yeah, I'm not sure I'm the best person to ask. I was able to finally relate to what Shikantasa is only after like a second awakening, not even first one. It's absolutely impossible to me. Just not my hookup. Because for me, it was all about like storming the gates of heaven. Just like sitting around, not for me. No thanks. But then, after that whole energy got completely obliterated, then, it's just, Yeah, I mean, it's just profound rest in a certain way. There's just nothing to do, no one to be, just it's kind of like finally stepping out of the whole game of time, because all the striving and all the sort of techniques that are sort of aiming at result, are they have their own use for sure, but in a way they are still within the time, right? They're within the time frame. But Shikantasa is just resting, and there's of course different ways of speaking. Like I know some teachers were saying it's a sitting in a unification of samadhi and prajna. Fancy name, which means there is a difference. Let's put it this way, between saying, okay, now I'll practice this thing called Shikantasa, and then you sit, and then there's a lot of thinking, and then there's like, oh, but I'm practicing Shikantasa, I should like get back. Oh, but maybe I should rest. Okay, and there's a lot of still movement within that, and that's perfectly fine too. There is a merit to just trying how it goes, and then there's like like again this sort of coming to utter rest of all that. And even if there can be like a couple of thoughts here and there, but there is, I that was my experience, that after the whole mind identification, everything is gone, then the sort of rest in basically reality rests, right? It's almost like the process of identity, process of person, is based on movement, right? It's based on keeping itself alive while kind of treading the waters and like staying afloat, right? But in a way, Shikantasa is like a rest, just going completely deep into reality alone, which is restful, which is timeless, which is not doing anything, even if things apparently happen, but the sense of it is it's like with the let's say in the ocean, there's waves, and there's patterns of things at the surface, and that's many of the practices or states operate in that, right? But there is like a utter stillness at the depths of the ocean, where distinction never gazed, right? Like where the light has never penetrated in some way. So that is the sort of essence of Shikantasa, but we can sort of attune to that. So instead of, let's say, making movements with our hands and feet at the surface of the ocean, we can just let ourselves completely be still. And then there's kind of, you can say, there are apparent layers to it. There's doing that at the surface, there's doing that kind of deeper, and there's that in the kind of bottomless darkness of it. So that's how
Yeah, thank you. That was helpful. Especially what you said about it's almost like stepping out of the game of time. Like I quit.
Yeah. In the end, we all need to quit at some point. we think that like awakening or liberation is a victory, but no, it's a defeat. So we need to.
It's like Shikantasa says, it's the path of failure.
Indeed, yeah.
And you realize that the only thing you can do is to fail, then you stop.
Yeah.
There's also, since you mentioned it before, I was wondering, I'd never really got any instructions to walking meditation. Sometimes I kind of spontaneously do it, but do you have any guidance on that also, walking meditation?
Yeah, it's again just like as with sitting meditation. There's so many types of approaches, and that like in the Soto, Zen temples, you make half a foot step per one breath, right? And you breathe kind of slowly, and so sometimes like you make 1 foot length of progress for 1 minute, right? and in some Rinzai temples, like they literally run. Like you have hard, if you're not fit, you have hard time. You have to like go skip a lap just to kind of get back into it. So there's many different ways, but I don't know, for whatever reason, which I'm not like a big necessarily Thich Nhat Hanh was not necessarily not my it's just not the type of energy I always responded. But he had this saying that I kind of enjoyed when he was instructing people in walking meditation. He was saying, walk as if you would kiss the earth with every step. Just really feeling your feet and kind of with that spirit almost touching the ground.
Thank you. Very helpful.
So we're approaching like the middle of the retreat in a way, like I think tomorrow. And I feel like after this intense first round that my meditation gets kind of wobbly, or that is really, it feels a bit, on one hand, I feel much more settled. So, and I feel that in the body, also in the mind. And on the other hand, it feels like I don't want to fall asleep. Like I don't want to waste the rest of the retreat. So, and just to regain freshness in the situation. And I'm aware that kind of the whole perception starts to shift. So what I feel now as distracted would have felt very concentrated 2 weeks ago. But at the same time, I wonder if you could give me any pointing how I can refresh the spirit or too deep to maybe like set the compass, how to be more present also, and not kind of getting in this kind of how do you say habits, just like yeah, now I know how it goes, and it just go. So and then all of a sudden the pot will be closed, and then it's like, oh shit, what did I do in the second round? And I'm aware that it's of course a thought, and it's kind of this whole time game is part of that. I started yesterday, like in my diary, just to write, okay, what is the most important question to you now? And start writing down this, letting this evolve, just like hour by hour. And so that's kind of a strategy that I try, just to remind me being awake in this moment.
Yeah. I mean, I would say probably you're in, as you said yourself, like there is a component in it that is like always within human experience, right? There's mixture of things, right? Like a little bit competing agendas, and there's a really kind of the sincere part of like trying to be like, okay, I find myself sometimes drifting off or something, and how actually I don't just let myself space out, right? Which is great. but at the same time, this whole meta commentary on like, we are here in a retreat, and it is pulling back to the thought, right? Like within this experience right now, if you go to sensation, and if you almost like, I know it's kind of, I'm being silly, but it's like if you ask sensation in your hand, it's like, which part of the retreat is it, right? Or like the grayness, which part of the retreat is it? The sounds, right? Like the freshness is in every single point of contact, right? In every single sound, in sensation, in color. Like the freshness is its nature. So in a certain way, you can say that trying to find the freshness is kind of like one of those things. It's like adding legs to the snake. So it's trying to look at actually those, rather than trying to look for freshness, is actually trying to look at the nature of that, that sort of pattern of something. And it's universal. Like, everybody experiences it to some degree, right? There's this like almost there are moments that we are completely just absorbed. There's just this sort of non-dual vivid aliveness, and then almost like there's a part of mind that can be like kind of stepping out from this, like, oh, how do I not lose this aliveness, right? But as soon as you say that, very movement is stepping out of that, right? So it's kind of just like watching for anything that wants to pull you out to the thought space. And again, there are some practical things in terms of, there is also like a weather pattern of retreat, right? Like which means, that's why yesterday, I thought it was really best to kind of just like rest the whole case, just have a little bit more free time, have a little bit more rest time, just to kind of refresh the whole system, not to kind of just keep something going. In a certain way, it's kind of like letting things be as they are, and sometimes it would mean that we would have slightly more thought, and it's anybody who has done in the longer retreats knows that it's like, sometimes you will be sleepy, especially you work hard, and you there are things that you kind of have to take care of. So of course there will be moments where you kind of are drowsy or something, and there's just like not many things you can do about that, right? Like you can wash your face with the cold water, you can try to lean back, kind of lean forward in the experience. There's almost like the movement back. This is kind of like the more kind of relaxed and kind of, but at some point becomes hazy, right? And the movement like this is more, and those are internal attitudes, energetic attitudes. They're not necessarily, you don't need to change your posture, right? Almost. But posture sometimes helps too. So there are like those little tiny moves that you can do if you feel kind of actually sleepy and drowsy. It's just part of it. But at the same time, it's that's how it goes. Like there's this kind of famous story of when I think Yasutani Roshi, which was the teacher who Angelo often talks about him because he was the person who was doing the doksans in the 3 pillars of Zen, right? And his instructions were what set him kind of off on this whole trajectory. So Yasutani Roshi came to San Francisco to was invited to some Zen center that they were creating there with Suzuki Roshi, and Yasutani Roshi was this dynamic, powerful, kind of energetic guy, and his Zen was very kind of one-pointed kind of thing, not much resting. And he used this phrase like sleepy Zen. He was just kind of a little bit looking down on what's going on in different pockets of Zen world. And so he came to San Francisco, and they had this big conference, and he was giving Dharma talk and saying, like, the sleepy Zen is good for nothing. You have to give it your all, to push through. You have to destroy the gateless barrier. And that's all great, and everybody was kind of inspired, but at the same time, some people from the Zen Center were feeling like, oh, like he's really trashing our style and trashing our teacher. Like, so the next morning there was meditation, and there was meditation in the meditation hall with everybody present, and one of the students who was in charge of the Zendo of that Zen Center was in charge of like walking with the stick or like measuring time, and he was trying to kind of like, he was walking with this, he was trying to walk with energy or whatever it means, just to show that, oh, we are not sleepy around here. And he was passing by the kind of the central place where the altar is, and he sees everybody, Yasutani Roshi, Suzuki Roshi, everybody is nodding and sleeping because they were talking, late into the night about this stuff, right? So in a certain way, this body has its limitations, and sometimes we will be feeling, just not as kind of maybe sharp and clear as sometimes we are otherwise. But in your case, I would more, rather than to that, temporary drowsiness that can come up here and there, I would just more pay attention to that meta commentary on the whole thing, like, oh yeah, we are here at the retreat, and I don't want this to unfold this way, because so what do I do now to prevent this unfolding that way? I mean, this is a little bit of that movement that kind of just goes into the world of concepts and time, and just try to check with the direct raw experience. And you can go into senses, which is also very such a blessing and such a grounding thing, just immediately, like, oh, is it fresh?
I just feel this, especially when I'm a bit sleepy or when I feel a bit dizzy. So and what I started doing now is like going back to Anapana, just like counting the breath, just to start to kind of find the way back to presence, or just like a little bit austerity maybe, or a bit of clarity.
If it helps you, you definitely know your system better, right? Like how things are for you. And I know some people are like swearing by Wim Hof. They say do that for like 5 to 10 minutes before meditation. It's like game changer for them in terms of drowsiness. And I know people, who lived in the Rinzai monasteries in Japan for many years, and they're sometimes, there's my friends, they're sending me emails saying, oh, this Wim Hof thing really works. It's great. So there are some little things, just like we talked about, like little stretching or things, sure, but again, it's like this is kind of one thing, just the drowsiness, but the second thing is that lamenting losing freshness, right? Which that very meta commentary is what kind of takes you away from the intimacy of the kind of direct experience right now.
And it's the same you told to Dimitri, just like to get into or to take it at zero distance, this meta commentary, just to feel it and go back into the body.
Yeah, sure. If that if that works, for sure. That's a good way. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, you're welcome. Right, 4 minutes. We can still have someone else if someone wants, but if not, we can always go for a break.
I have a basic question.
All right.
So yeah, I was really feeling Dimitri's question and what Asker was saying. I kind of feel like I'm in the opposite place of Dimitri, where, and this isn't new for me, but there's this place that feels like a balance point where there isn't really pushing or pulling. It's not always there, but by like noticing it, I can kind of find it, and it's really nice. And I don't really worry if there's a thought that's included. It's kind of the energy sensation that's included in this balance, you know? And the only thing that seems like it might be a problem is that sometimes the thoughts can get going and I just kind of let them go. So it turns into like a daydream almost. And I'm wondering, like, at what point is letting the thoughts go no longer helpful? Because I used to have the opposite problem where I was trying so hard to not think that there would just be like this pressure and it was so uncomfortable. And now it's like a sit can go by like that, but I'm not necessarily aware that thought is happening the entire time. Do you know what I mean?
I think I know. Yeah.
Yeah.
But do you find that problematic? That
I mean, no. I guess it's a thought that it would be problematic that maybe is the only problem.
Yeah.
Because it feels like this balance point throughout my entire body and throughout like everything. It's so nice. And even if it's a thought about, oh, what I'm going to do after the retreat, or like a person I want to see, or, you know, I just kind of let it go, but it's still in that balance point somehow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the, you know, the practices of naming the thought as a thought, or which is kind of first sort of like disidentifying with it, and then the practice of merging with the essence of thought, which is more kind of the secondary movement of clarifying, you know, the sort of totality within the particular in terms of consciousness, right? They are both helpful, but it's once you are not identified with thought, and once you are abiding within the sort of nature of consciousness, it's not that you have to examine or like be able to catch every single thing that arises within its field, right? Because those are all like remedies, right? So it's like, yeah, it's again, it's like this kind of shooting one arrow so it meets the other arrow in the air and both fall away, right? So in a way, it's kind of correctful movement to aid some, you know, so to remedy some disbalance. But once kind of like you feel that you are actually in this place of balance, right? That, you know, there's no need to kind of be able to kind of, the thoughts literally become like chirping of birds outside. Like it's irrelevant, it's non-problematic, it happens by itself, it happens to no one. You know, is just that. And of course I understand, because at the beginning you said something about like, oh, it's sometimes just going totally into daydreaming. So of course then it is a little bit like, you know, it's all right to have like a corrective movement of like just you know, like literally sometimes is even like making one longer exhale, right? And this exhale is almost like right at the end of exhale, just this point of like utter stillness, right? And it's kind of almost like reminding, like a little invitation. It's one of those things, like, you know, it's another like a Zen thing saying about like giving the cow long chain, right? Like if you keep a cow on a very short chain, it'll just like keep jerking in.
That's
right?
exactly my experience. The chain is long, but like maybe it's too long now.
so if it happens, is like you hear some sounds in the distance, you can't even see the cow, like you can just,
Totally.
just gently pull it tiny bit, but overall it feels like you are in the right spot. It's you don't need to like change anything.
Yeah, it does feel like that. It feels like I'm in the right spot, and I think that feels intuitive. Like there's just no question.
Yeah.
But then the question comes up, like, this is like a little too easy, you know?
Oh yeah. But that's actually a common one,
Yeah.
right? It's almost like, am I supposed to just like hang out? You know what I mean?
Exactly. It's usually so hard.
Yeah.
Okay.
But it is something like, you know, we're used to that whole thing being a struggle, and it almost feels like, oh, like I'm out of the business. Like,
a little
there's
bit.
nothing to do.
Yeah.
And also like one thing because you said something like, sometimes I'm not aware of a thought or something. And there's, I've heard Adyashanti say once, and it was very interesting to me here at that point where I was in the unfoldment. He said, like, if someone would ask, because someone said, like, oh, is the amount of thought really so irrelevant and this and that, and so like, if someone would ask me whether I think or not, I would just not able to even say yes or no. I just it's just so irrelevant that I have no clue, right?
That's helpful.
So in a certain way, it's like, you know, of course, like whenever we do feel like things starts like really out of balance, which means like, you know, going to total daydream, yeah, we can do like a little thing to just like bring it back, you know, home. But overall, it feels like it's more of that like, am I supposed to be that kind of just like at ease?
Because I think in the past I would overcorrect, and then that would turn into striving, and then it just ruins the whole thing. Do you know?
Yeah.
Thank you so much. That's really helpful.
Yeah. So it's like, enjoy while it's last, because there are other you know, things to, maybe some material will come up or something. So it's like, no, it's absolutely your birthright to just be able to do right now this complete allowance and nothing else.
Thanks, Koen.
All right.